Hello everybody and welcome to the Lincoln Students' Union Elections 2021 question time. This is the question time for all candidates running for Vice President, Campaigns and Environment. How this is going to work is each candidate will be invited to give a 1-minute speech. Following that, we have prepared 2 questions with an additional question from the Board of Trustees. We also have created the opportunity for students to ask questions via Instagram, and students are able to submit questions via Instagram and Facebook throughout the live. Please ensure that these are appropriate questions for all candidates and are not manifesto specific or personal to candidates. Each candidate has 30 seconds to answer each of those questions, and I will raise my hand like this when there is 5 seconds remaining. Please remember to keep your comments respectful if you wish to engage in the live chat. So we'll get straight into it with the 1-minute speeches, and up first is Ethan.
Hi everyone, my name is Ethan. I am a third year Politics and International Relations student. There's lots of things that I want to do in this role, but 4 of the main things that I want to achieve are introducing wellbeing roles into the campaigns network committees, running campaigns to help students reduce their food waste, using the campaigns network to run more national campaigns to use our voice collectively as students to make real national change. And the 4th is to produce a sustainability report to assess how the SU can be more sustainable. Whilst I cannot claim to speak for everyone everyone that the campaigns network represents, I will try my best to listen to all of your officers and work with them to do everything I can to push forward change for you. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Nat.
Hi everyone, I'm Nat. I'm your current LGBT officer and a third year psychology student. Like everyone, I have a lot that I would love to achieve, but mainly I would like to improve accessibility and safety on campus, working with disabilities officers to improve accessibility on campus and in the city, and working with VPWE to improve safety for women and gender non-conforming people. I'd also want to make Freshers' Fair single-use, plastic-free and paperless, because we all know that there's a lot of that around Freshers' Fair, and I believe it's really not needed. And I also want to continue with the Enviro Fair, the Christmas market, the local street food market, just to encourage students to shop locally, sustainably. And also love to lobby local businesses to help them reduce their carbon footprint, because it's hard to make effective change with climate change individually. And yeah, I would love to be your #1 VPCE.
Thank you, Nat. Moving on now to Jacob.
Hi everybody, my name is Jacob Simpson and I'm confident that I have the skills, commitment and knowledge to represent students across campus in my role. I have been an active part of the SU since first year, and I have first-hand experience in how the SU is run and how decisions are made. As with everybody else, I have a lot that I want to achieve as well in this role, such as I want to introduce a zero food waste policy around the SU, lobby the university and the accommodation services to provide compost bins. I want to set up a working class officer within the campaigns network, and I want to set up an SE sustainability shop and a green week.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to the questions, and just so that viewers are aware, the person who answers first.
Sorry to interrupt, Kaylee, you didn't.
Oh, Riley, my apologies. Riley.
No, it's perfectly fine. Hi guys, I'm Riley. If you don't know me, if you do know me, you might know me from the LGBT campaigns group, where I've been gender rep for 2-3 years now. Pride Society, where I've been VP and been involved since its inception. Those of you who know me know I'm really passionate about anti-discrimination and the SU's policy surrounding that. What I want to do as your VPCE is really fundamentally rework that anti-discrimination policy, because as it stands, it's kind of two sentences on a little PDF. I want to expand that to handbooks for each discriminated against group. Every marginalised group gets a handbook that is complete with process that is fundamentally enforced by a discrimination support team made out of your volunteer officers, influenced by your volunteer officers. Sorry about that. And on top of that, I obviously want to work on your environment, making your environment safe, accessible, friendly. That means getting ramps in every SU building, accessibility needs wherever.
Thank you, Riley. We will now move on to the questions. So, as I was just saying, the first person that answers will change for each question. So question number 1 is, within this role, there are 5 campaigns officers as well as 3 celebrated history months. What would you do to ensure the officers are creating impactful campaigns and events on campus? And the first person to answer this is Nat.
As someone who's been involved in LGBT History Month for 2 years, I understand the need to have an effective support base. So I would love to create a solid basis for students to come to so that they can essentially, there are specific steps. So they're like, okay, I have a history month to do. What steps do I need to do? And I would love as officer to, as VPWE, sorry, to create those steps, specific steps so that students can come to me to say, okay, this is what I want to do and this is how I go about it.
Thank you, Nat. Next to answer is Jacob.
Thank you. I think to have a successful event and to host successful campaigns, you need to have achievable and effective promotions to do. So in relation to that, what I would do is I would ensure that we get our promotions out to everybody, and especially highlight and promote campaigns network during freshers, before freshers come to the university, and ensure that as many people across campus can reach our campaigns.
Thank you. Next to answer is Riley.
So fundamentally, what I want to do is completely reshape the way that SU free speech policy works. As it stands, a lot of people are a bit afraid to pull off events, especially when things like Reclaim the Night are so big, and when other these are doing such big events. So what I want to do is really encourage students to get out there and do what they can to explore those history months, explore those things, and push for that, push really hard.
Thank you, Riley. Next up we have Ethan.
I think over the last year, we've seen how important social media and how powerful social media can be. So to support the officers, I would introduce more social media like training and working with marketing to support these history months.
Thank you. Question number 2 is, what campaigns do you feel the executive committee should prioritise next year? And first to answer this is Jacob.
Thank you. So in relation to the prioritisation of campaigns, I think there should be a campaign based on invisible disabilities across campus, because not all disabilities are visible, and we need to ensure that students across campus know that or are aware of disabilities that aren't visible.
Thank you. Next to answer is Riley.
So yeah, coming off what Jacob said, obviously we've got the Sunflower Lanyards campaign, which is already highlighting invisible disabilities, which is fantastic. But I really want to push so people can acknowledge that, can see that. I also want to look at things like trans rights, because as it stands, trans rights are being slowly eaten away, and as a trans and disabled person, that obviously really matters to me. Women's rights are coming under fire. BLM is a massively important thing. So I really want to get all hands on deck in terms of next year to make sure that we are getting the best activism possible out of the best people, with a lot of intersectionality. With
Thank you, Riley. Next up, we have Ethan.
I think that working with like intersectionality and working with different campaigns groups combined to run campaigns, I think is going to be really important next year. I also think that after the year we've had, looking at mental health training for committees and stuff is also going to be massively important.
Thank you. And finally, we have Matt.
I think it's hard to say which ones you prioritise, because every group has something that they really need to talk about. And so I would love that every single campaigns group has their big event of the year to highlight whatever they want to that year. So, for example, the women's group, especially at the moment with things like Reclaim the Streets, they can have that campaign, and that the LGBT group can have Transgender Day of Remembrance or Trans Visibility Week, because of their rights are coming under so much fire at the moment. And so I think having those specific, everyone having their own event is the best way forward.
Thank you. Moving on to question 3, and this is a question from the CEO on behalf of the Board of Trustees. What would you do in your role to reinforce the message of a climate emergency, which the Students' Union has joined many other organisations in declaring? And the first person to answer this one is Riley.
So as a Students' Union, I think we're doing a really good job in terms of highlighting exactly, with things like the Enviro Fair, things like litter picking, exactly how important the environment is. But as a university, we're not doing our best in terms of where the university's funding is going. There are investments in companies that are massive polluters, and those need to be shifted away to corporations which are providing eco-friendly solutions rather than pollution. And yeah, there's a bunch.
Thank you. And next up to answer is Ethan.
I think that the climate emergency is obviously a massively important thing for this year. In my manifesto, I talk about two of my environmental promises. The first one is looking at running campaigns to help students reduce their food wastage, because I think as students, we're really bad at chucking away food. Secondly, is producing a comprehensive sustainability report. So looking at everything that the SU does, top to bottom, and looking at seeing how it can be more sustainable and environmentally friendly.
Thank you. Next to answer is Nat.
I think it's hard for us to make effective climate change individually, and I think getting students involved in lobbying MPs and the government to make effective change and take this seriously and stop investing in companies that are big polluters and start thinking of more greener ways to live and get the government to do that, because I think it's very hard we all know how we kind of can make our own lives greener, but it's very hard to sometimes know how to make the world greener. So getting students involved in campaigns to lobby the government is probably the way forward that I would go.
Thank you, Nat. And last to answer is Jacob.
Thank you. So in relation to that question, I would say in my manifesto, I have highlighted 2 key points about what I would do with environmental concerns. And one of them would be to host a sustainable shop monthly, where students can donate unwanted but perfectly usable items, and they can use tokens to buy and purchase items that other students have donated. And I think that's a great way to stop fast fashion and throwaway habits across campus.
Thank you. We will now move on to our questions from social media. So our first question is a question from Instagram, and the question is, can you tell us about your vision for this academic year 21-22? And first to answer is Ethan.
I think one of the main things that I think is really important is getting back to normal and starting to run campaigns in person and getting out and talking to people and hearing about what the issues really are and how the world is affecting people. And I think that is my vision for this year, is just to sort of get back to normality and get back to discussing things with people and talking about how they feel again.
Thank you. Next up to answer is Nat.
I think my vision for this year is to highlight like all the groups that are marginalized and the issues that we're facing in the world. I'd love students to become activists. It's something that I've become so passionate about as LGBT officer, is becoming an activist, and I would love the students to really get involved in that, and the Campaigns Network is the most effective way to do that. And I would love to raise the profile of the Campaigns Network so students can get involved in that and can get involved in more activism.
Thank you. Next up to answer is Jacob.
Thank you. I think this is a really good question because, we are transitioning from such a strange year. And my priority for next year would be to make sure that the Campaigns Network is more visible across campus. I want to ensure that we hold successful campaigns to represent all students from every background. And I want to ensure that we integrate different parts of the Student Union within the Campaigns Network to ensure that our campaigns are visible for everybody.
Thank you, Jacob. And next up, we've got Riley.
So I think that the important thing this year is that knowing that there is no going back to normal. Really, when it comes to like the year that 2020 was, we have to realise that we've been going. Marginalised groups have been under a lot of stress, under a lot of. There's been a lot of chaos surrounding protests and that sort of campaigning. So it's boots on the ground. It's getting involved in campaigning. It's getting involved in environmental activism. It's getting involved and making real change.
Thank you, Riley. Our next question is also from Instagram, and the question is, will you ensure we have actual free speech for all and not only with viewpoints that you personally deem correct? And the first person to answer this is Nat.
I think what's really important is working with the university to ensure that we have a very specific free speech policy, but also a hate speech policy. I think sometimes when people talk about their viewpoints, sometimes it can almost verge into hate speech, and it's something that we really want to get rid of and ensure that we are talking about issues that matter to us and all students, and so students can have their position to talk about what their positions are, but also that we're not allowing hate speech to be carried out on campus. Sorry.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jacob.
Thank you. In relation to that, I am passionate about people feeling inclusive, feeling friendly and welcome in university, and I believe that we should all be able to say, we should all be able to speak in a way that is inclusive to everybody, and that we are not directing speech towards people in a hateful manner.
Thank you. Next to answer is Riley.
So yeah, echoing what the others have said, free speech is incredibly important, but free speech does not mean freedom from consequences. Hate speech is something that we really need to crack down on, and in order to do that, that's why I've sort of introduced this idea of the anti-discrimination policy. This is why I've got the idea of reworking the free speech policy, because I want people to be able to speak their minds, but I don't want people to get hurt. So that sort of having access to say what you want, but also making sure that you aren't hurting anyone in the process is super important to me.
Thank you, Riley. And Ethan.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that everyone else has said. I think there's a really important distinction between free speech and hate speech, and it's ensuring we don't cross those lines, because that's when people get hurt. I don't think it's not about whether I personally don't agree with it. It's about if people are going to be hurt or offended by it, then that's when free speech isn't free speech anymore. That's when it becomes hate speech. And I think that's when it's really important to understand and to discuss that with students and make students feel safe.
Thank you. The next question is a question from Facebook, which is, after the horrific recent events, how through campaigns would you ensure women feel protected? And the first person to answer this one is Jacob.
Thank you. That's a very important question. In relation to how I would ensure that women feel safe across campus is working with the women's officer, putting on campaigns and making sure that we are representing women and signposting them to local charities, and if they are victims of any abuse or anything like that, I want to ensure that they can get the help they need and to ensure that they are visible within the campaigns network.
Thank you, Jacob. Next answer is Riley.
So I want to work with, like I said, women's officer in terms of how women feel safe walking home, getting involved in more of those events where women can walk home with a buddy, can ask quite politely for a buddy to walk home with them, and encouraging allies to get involved and really push for that, as well as an anti-discrimination policy surrounding women's rights.
Thank you, Riley. Next to answer is Ethan.
I think for this question, it's really important to actually listen to women and the women's officer and the women's campaigns group. I don't think as a man I can sit here and mansplain women's safety in the city, but I think it's really important to know that I am absolutely committed to ensuring that all students feel safe, and particularly at this time, women.
Thank you. And last answer is Nat.
If you kind of look across people that are running, you see a lot of the women, the wellbeing community officers are wanting to put in place things that will improve women's safety and give them people to go to if they need it. And that's something that I want to work on them with. Same thing with the women's officer, but also including gender non-conforming people in this conversation, because women and gender non-conforming people are at the highest risk of being victims of violence. So I would like to work on a policy that helps all of them.
Thank you very much for those answers. We have come to the end of our question time as there are no more questions from the floor. I'd like to take this time to thank all of our candidates for Vice President Campaigns and Environment for answering the questions today, and thank you to those of you who are watching this question time. You have until 2 p.m. this Friday, the 19th of March, to cast your vote. So please head to www.lincolnsu.com to read the manifestos and make your voices heard. Thank you.